2 additional cases in return travellers who are in quarantine hotels, and 2 further cases under investigation. So that's 11 new cases, brings the total in Victoria to 1,645. The number hospitalised remains at 7, and only 2 in intensive care. So the Ridges outbreak, as I say, brings the number to 6. The outbreak management squad has gone out on site to investigate. They've already looked into some processes, but the investigation will be ongoing. They're going to be providing additional training and education on personal protective equipment for all of the staff who are supporting that site. And they'll look into what has potentially happened here that's allowed transmission to occur. There'll be a thorough review of all processes, so how cleaning has been managed, how personal protective equipment has been managed, how all of the cases in that hotel are managed. The staff there have all been tested, so there might be additional cases if people become symptomatic and get retested, but at the moment that's the limit to the numbers that are known in that outbreak. For the Keilor Downs outbreak, as I said yesterday, it was a big household. There are some links to extended family members in other households. I wouldn't have been surprised if there were additional cases, and that's what's turned out today. One of those cases attends Holy Eucharist Primary School. That child did not have symptoms on site, but we're still taking measures of quarantining the classroom for that child. But the primary school, I fully expect to reopen on Monday. In terms of the Keilor Downs Secondary College, we'll need to assess over the weekend, make sure that all parents are contacted. Again, that cleaning has been done before that opens. It may well open on Monday, it might open on Tuesday, but happy to take questions.
So, sorry, with the Keilor Downs outbreak, so one of the new cases is a primary school student.
Yes.
So their entire class has been quarantined.
Yeah, which is a normal process for a school case. Schools often close for the day, and then the close contacts, so those identified who are in the same room for more than 2 hours, so that's generally a classroom, would quarantine for that 2-week period before that class returns.
So will that class be quarantined effective for Monday, or are they in quarantine this week as well?
Well, they'll be quarantined from now. So obviously, if they're at home from today, that 14-day period will finish over the next 2 weeks.
What age group are we talking about?
So it's grade 2 class.
So we've got 7 or 8-year-olds, about 25 of them at home now,
I expect the numbers will be, in the 20s or 30s.
and a teacher, obviously.
Yeah, I would expect so.
But the school will open as normal on Monday?
Yeah, it should open as normal. As I say, transmission within schools is really very unusual. We haven't had children infect adults in school settings. Transmission between children seems to be pretty unusual, and for an asymptomatic child, I think the risk is probably even less. So personally, I would say I don't think we expect any additional cases here, but obviously we do quarantine as a precautionary measure, and if any of those children become symptomatic, they'd be tested.
Is there any feeling that maybe we've let schools go back too early, given we've had 2 cases now of schools having to be directly impacted and quarantined?
No, I don't think so. I think all along I've talked about the fact that we've needed to get to a level of community transmission that's low enough, that's given me confidence that schools could go back. Part of our concern was the level of transmission that might be out there in the community. We get 1 or 2 community cases per day, so it really is at exceptionally low levels. And we're doing record levels of testing. So, I've got an assurance that the community cases that we're finding are really almost all that's out there. And as I say, kids are part of community, teachers are part of the adult community. So if there are community cases, and in this case, it's in Keilor Downs, then schools can be affected by it. But I think we're at a level now where overwhelmingly kids will not be cases, teachers will not be cases, and schools will function normally.
What are the latest testing rates among teachers and have you teachers tested so far?
I haven't got specific rates of testing for teachers, but it's been taken up reasonably well, as I understand. There are some thousands of teachers who've tested thus far. I think the only case that I'm aware of is this Keilor Downs teacher who's unrelated to this student case, who was tested a couple of weeks ago. So amongst the thousands tested, there's been one teacher.
And with Keilor Downs, the outbreak, so, sorry, what's the total now attributed to that?
11, I believe.
11 now attributed to that. Is there only still one of those is actually a student at Keilor Downs, or are there other kids or students?
No, just one at Keilor Downs Secondary College, yeah.
The other 10 are associated in household contacts.
That's
with
right.
that student. And back on Ridges, so, sorry again, how many more cases brings it to 6?
4 additional cases identified overnight.
Students?
They're all staff, yes.
Okay, and so what's the process now? Those family contacts of those workers or quarantined?
Yeah, so all of the close contacts of those 6 cases have been identified. They'll be in quarantine for the 2-week period. As I say, everyone's been tested. The remainder are negative. There might be some pending results, but of all the results that we have, there are no other positive cases. But we need to be alert to the fact that staff over the next 2 weeks might develop symptoms, might require retesting, and we might have additional cases.
Of the 6 at Ridges, how many are staff and how many are quarantine travellers?
So we're talking about staff cases. These 6,
At-
all 6 are staff. Yeah.
Have you had any quarantine travellers there that have tested positive?
No. So most of the cases who are in Ridges normally are cases who've already become symptomatic. So they're known positive cases held in the hotel for the period of their isolation.
Right, and so, sorry, so when they've come back, they were already known cases come back from overseas, or how have those been?
No, they've developed illness in quarantine and had their isolation as cases managed in Ridges Hotel.
So they've been in another hotel and they get moved to Ridges?
Yeah, either in another hotel or they've been quarantined in Ridges and developed symptoms there.
So in total, how many quarantine travellers do we have there who are symptomatic and who do have coronavirus?
So there were 13 as of yesterday who were cases in Ridges Hotel, and 3 who were close contacts continuing their quarantine.
And now 6 staff members who work there have contracted, so there's been a breakdown in the infection control.
Yeah, there's been something that's occurred that's allowed transmission to occur, whether it's been through surfaces, whether it's been through personal protective equipment not being used appropriately, or some other mechanism. But as I say, there's a thorough review process going on. The outbreak management team have been out there. They're already reinforcing all of the things that we know are required to minimise the risk of transmission, and there'll be an ongoing investigation.
So when we first started hearing about Ridges staff getting the virus, it was a little unclear from health authorities if it was just a coincidence. Are you saying that now you know it's not a coincidence, it has been between the return travellers and the staff?
We can't say if it's between the return travellers and the staff, but obviously these are staff who are working at a site where there are a number of infected individuals. We have to work on the presumption that they picked it up there through some mechanism, but we won't know the answer until we've really completed the investigation.
So the only guests in that hotel, all are confirmed cases?
No, there are 3 who are not symptomatic, who are in quarantine. There are 13 who are isolated as cases.
It's quite a staggering thing that people are working as hotel staff and they're going to get sick with this virus.
Yeah, look, we have to be really careful about how we manage staff and how we manage cases in hotel quarantine. We've had over 12,000 people come through Victoria through quarantine. We've had over 100 cases who've developed illness in their period of quarantine. It's a huge logistic exercise. There are people who need to move out for fresh air. They need their meals delivered. Some of them need medical or compassionate exemptions to leave the hotel for either a period of time or to be discharged into hospital or other care. So it's a complex process, but there is a lot of support that comes through the outbreak management team around how you manage the hygiene issues, the personal protective equipment, and there is lots and lots of training and education that occurs. But whenever you identify something like this, you obviously have to go back through a process of seeing what's broken down, if something has, and to make sure that it's remedied.
Would you feel comfortable working at that hotel at the moment?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not being asked to work at the hotel. I think everyone who's working there understands what they need to do. People who've become ill will want to know what the findings of the investigation are and make sure that everything's been addressed.
Have you been satisfied with the infection control measures they've taken to date?
Well, I don't know the findings of the outbreak management team review. They will go through a really thorough process to see what's happened, and they will report back on any findings that they have.
What's the thinking behind putting
Well, there's no issue in either having them all in the one hotel or having them across a number of quarantine sites, but having them in one hotel where people have the understanding of how you manage an infectious case, the PPE that you have to wear as a nurse, as mental health support, as someone delivering food, are all important measures that they will have an understanding of in that hotel. But cases also get managed in quarantine hotels where there are others who are not unwell.
It certainly points to there's been a failure in the system here.
Well, we don't know exactly what's happened. There's an investigation, but the fact that there are people who've developed coronavirus means that we need to look into how transmission might have occurred.
And the staff have caught it from the travellers versus in reverse. It's not.
Well, that's right. The new cases that have arisen in staff have come from other confirmed cases, but we don't know the direction of transmission. Some of it might have been staff member to staff member after some staff member have developed illness, but all of that will be looked into.
Apart from that outbreak management team, will there be other resources put into that particular hotel to try and minimise, I suppose, any further infection?
Well, I think the findings of the outbreak management team review will be a set of recommendations about anything that might be required. But at the moment, and the very purpose of the outbreak management team is to apply those additional staff and resources in order to manage any risks that might be present. But if they've got recommendations around change processes or procedures or additional staffing or different staffing to help mitigate risk, then we'll take that on board.
With the Keilor cluster, so can you just break down again if it's all connected to that one family, or have there been others linked in?
No, there's an extended family group across different households, and all 11 cases are part of that extended family group.
Are you still setting up the testing there though in that community to ease concerns?
Yeah, look, it's both the ease concerns, but it's also we want everyone who's got symptoms that are compatible with coronavirus across Victoria to get tested. But there is a mobile testing site that's been newly set up in Keilor Downs. It's at the Keilor Community Hub, 704B Old Calder Highway, Keilor. There are details on the coronavirus website. There are a number of other testing sites around Sunshine, St Albans, Maribyrnong, and people in that area maybe in particular should think about testing if they've got symptoms, even mild symptoms. So I'm talking about runny nose, sore throat, cough, fever, and the Keilor Community Hub site is a drive-through site. You can stay in your car, get a swab at the back of the nose, and get a result within a couple of days.
Over other states, our numbers are still steadily maintaining versus people that are getting down, states that are getting down to zero.
Yeah.
Why are we so far? What seems behind?
Oh, we've clearly got some hotspots in Victoria right now. We're managing a couple of these outbreaks. A single case can lead to 10, 11 cases in a household. That's the reality of a very infectious virus. But as you've seen from the aged care clusters we've had and other outbreaks, that we get on top of them through isolation and quarantine process. So there's a first generation of cases, if you like, but the quarantining of people who are well but who've been exposed is the way that you stop that ongoing transmission. So we'll get on top of these cases in the same way as we have with previous clusters, but those ongoing community cases are all a risk for outbreaks and clusters to occur. We're also hosting a great number of return travellers, and those numbers are counted in Victoria. So of the 12,000 plus people who've been international travellers going into quarantine in Victoria, that 100 plus cases are counted in Victoria's numbers. And so the few cases that we get every day, they're going to continue. People are still returning to Australia and they'll be counted in Victoria's numbers.
As restrictions ease, is this what you were expecting, or has it exceeded what you perhaps thought may have still been occurring and surfacing?
No, I always expected that there would be low levels of community transmission. I'm still hoping that we're going to drive transmission down to zero if people do the right things with physical distancing, with all of the public health directions that are in place, and are mindful of the fact that even as we ease restrictions, they need to do the right thing in getting tested, in isolating if they're symptomatic, and in managing the distance between others. So we can continue to do better in Victoria if everyone does the right thing. But as I say, single cases of community transmission will continue to put us at risk of clusters and outbreaks ongoing.
Every weekend, the issue becomes shopping centres. This morning, there's been some extraordinary pictures coming out of Aldi in particular. There's a sale on pots today that people are queuing up, rushing in to get them. Are people listening to you? And what is your advice when it comes to going to the shops, going to a shopping centre when there isn't a lot of options to go?
Yeah, I mean, people by and large are listening, but I'm concerned about certain quarters of the community who aren't getting the message, who are reflecting on the fact that we're easing some restrictions and are thinking we're back to normal. We are not back to normal. Nowhere in Australia will be back to normal for some time. And even in jurisdictions where they might have had 0 cases for a few weeks, if people go back to normal behaviours where they put others at risk because they're in very close contact, whether it's a shopping centre, a queue for anything, we will get really significant clusters because you suddenly expose not just 1 or 2 people in your household, but 10 or 20 or 100 people. South Korea is closing schools, having gotten on top of cases in recent weeks. They've only just opened their schools, but they've had 60, 70 new cases per day from 2 or 3. So we are very aware of needing to be on top of this, and that includes everyone doing the right thing. So I would say if you're going shopping, have a look. If it's a time of day, if it's a day of the week where it's extremely crowded, come back at another time or go to another place to do your shopping. If you can't safely keep 1.5 metres away from others, you're at risk. If you're a vulnerable individual, over 70, 65 with chronic illness, Indigenous and over 50 with chronic illness, you shouldn't go into those settings where you can't safely distance from others.
What about sectors of the community that are excuse me, actively resistant to this message? Like there's a rally plan for anti-vaxxers today. What would you say to those?
I would probably say nothing to anti-vaxxers. There is no message that can get through to people who have no belief in science. So there's really no starting point. I think, unfortunately, for some people, they have picked up on a message. It gets amplified through a small network of social media, and there's probably no reaching them. I want everyone else to do the right thing because we'll still get there. If there's a very, very small group who are doing the wrong thing, they're putting themselves at risk, but I don't think it'll threaten our overall approach if the great majority of Victorians are doing the right thing, which I know they are.
Given the numbers we've seen this week, are you still feeling confident all is on track for those easing of measures come Monday morning?
Yeah, I think we'll always have a balance of needing to manage outbreaks very promptly, very robustly, as they occur, because those numbers increase very quickly, sometimes over a very short period of time. But the levels of community transmission are still at a point where I'm confident that we can continue to ease restrictions. We need to watch very closely. We need to watch people's behaviours. We need to watch the numbers over several weeks. They won't change overnight in terms of community transmission, but they could creep up over several weeks. And so really this month and next month are the ones to watch in terms of understanding how well we're doing here.
Just in terms of the primary school student who tested positive, did they live with the secondary student from Keilor down?
I don't know, honestly. They're part of that extended family group. I don't know if they're in the same household.
Do you expect to see more cases in regional Victoria given tourism is reopening? Regional Victoria's been relatively spared so far.
I think there's always a risk. Obviously, people are moving moving across the state as they should. We're allowing these restrictions to ease because the risk is low. But everyone should be aware of the possibility that you can introduce it into new areas as there's greater freedom to move across the state. So those same messages apply. If you're unwell, you shouldn't be going to places where you could put others exposed to coronavirus. You shouldn't be staying overnight with other family members, with friends, with acquaintances if you're unwell. You should defer your travel. You should not go with a group if you're symptomatic. But it is a risk. We'll continue to watch all of those places, and if people come down with illness, they should test. That applies equally to regional areas. We want to find it wherever it is across the state.
What's the latest thinking on kids having grandparents considering overnight stays are allowed?
I think it's for individual families to make a judgment about that. As I say, there's no glossing over the vulnerability of elderly people and people with chronic illness. They are at greater risk of severe disease. They're not at greater risk of catching it necessarily. And again, they're doing the right thing. They're isolating and keeping their distance. But there's a balance here. The psychological well-being of people is dependent on being able to see loved ones, being able to hug them and be close to them. So for those families, I think they make a judgment. If all the kids are well, if there's a relatively short period of time spent together, then that risk is much less. If kids are unwell, if they're spending hours and hours in close proximity, then the risk goes up. But I can totally understand grandparents wanting to hug their grandkids and grandkids to see their grandparents, absolutely. Thanks a lot.